All right, cool. It's 2:30, so I guess we'll get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to How to Make VGM ReMixes, the OC Remix Workshop panel. Hi, yay. Okay. So, how many people have been to this panel before? We've done it a couple times in the past. Just show of hands real quick. Okay. Not that many people, so some new people. Okay, so the way this panel works is, well, who here knows what OC Remix is? Everyone? Yeah? Okay, good. All right, I won't go into it. So my name is Sharik Ansari, better known as DarkeSword on the site. I have some panelists up here with me. We're going to talk about how to get into making remixes and how to get into making music. And we're actually going to have two of our artists up here are going to be doing a live mix while we're talking about stuff, and we're going to check in with them periodically. But first, let me introduce to my right, I have, guys, shh. So my right, I have Nabil Ansari.
Yeah, so
Nabil,
my name is Nabil. I've been with OCR for a while. I also work for, if you guys know Zircon, I do music technology stuff with him. If you guys heard of Super Audio Cart, which is a cool VST that makes, you know, all sorts of chiptune sounds and SNES sounds, I worked on that also.
All right. Sorry, guys, we're doing some sound check stuff real quick. So the way this panel is going to work, it's not really like a it's not like a master class. You're not going to walk out of here with like all of the tools you need to ever you're not going to walk out of this door and like suddenly be like the greatest musician in the world. That's not the goal of this. The goal of this panel is to have a dialogue with you guys about how to get into making music, what you need to get started. If some of you are already musicians and are already doing this stuff, and if you have some like creative issues that you're trying to work out, we can talk about that. How many people here already like make music in like bands, or you make them like a bedroom producer style thing? Okay, pretty good number of people. Cool. Okay, so let me introduce our mixers here to my left. So, Andrew, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, everyone. I am Andrew Lures, also on the site known as Oceans Andrew, or OA. I've been part of OCR for about, I don't know, at least 10 years. 10 plus.
Yeah.
My name is Michael Birch, a.k.a. Flexstyle, and I've been with OCR since 09, I guess.
09, yeah.
Yeah. I've done stuff for OCR, Game Chops, and I've done some video game soundtrack work, and most recently got to help out with a remix album for Crypt of the Necrodancer.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, cool. So why don't we get started? Nabil, how did you get into like remixing and music and stuff?
Actually, when I was really little, I watched my brother, Sharik here. He used to make remixes on what was then called Fruity Loops. And he still does on FL Studio nowadays. But I would sit on his bed in his bedroom and watch him make remixes.
Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, sorry, I don't. What's
No, go ahead.
you good? Okay.
Keep talking.
So I would, so I wanted to try it out myself. So then he lent me his laptop, and then I started playing around with Fruity Loops. And then over the years, I started, asking him questions. I started learning about music theory, and then I found OCR, or I came to OCR when I was old enough. At like 2009, probably.
Something like that.
And then I started posting my music on the forums, then I got feedback, and I started getting a lot better. I entered the competitions, and that was really a good way for me to practice my skills. And then now I write a lot of original music, and I write music for indie games also now, too.
Yeah. You have Soul. Is it?
Yeah.
The indie game
So
showcase?
let me plug my game real quick. So at the Mag Indie Video Game Showcase, it's near the arcade in the merchandise area. There's all these indie games, and my game, it's called Soul. It's being showcased there, and so you can play the game. There's like a couch and like a TV, so go check it out.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I got started with music in 4th grade. I joined band. How many band kids are here? Yeah. Okay, cool. So in 4th grade, I started playing trumpet, and then all throughout high school, I was a super like band nerd. And I was in like marching band and all that stuff. And then I started getting into writing music. So growing up, like most of my music that I listened to was music from video games because I played video games all the time. And then I just started like trying to like arrange that stuff for trumpet, and then I got into composing, and then I found OC Remix, and then I started doing that stuff. So Andrew, are you working on stuff, or you want to?
Yeah, I started. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Cool. So Sorry, I'm kind of like scatterbrained right now. because this light's in my eye, so I'm kind of like, what's going on? So what we're gonna do is we've got Mike and Andrew are gonna be remixing the same song, but they're gonna be doing it in different styles. So the song that they picked is Sticker Brush Symphony from Donkey Kong Country 2. Right? Yeah. Some people, some DKC fans out there. All right, so I'm gonna play it real quick if you've never heard it before. Hopefully this YouTube video works. Come on, man. You can do it.
I got you if you need it.
Come on. Oh, my.
No.
Fun fact. Never played Donkey Kong Country 2. Don't know the music that much. I was a Sega Genesis kid. Here it comes. Yeah.
Once we get our hands on it, the bass will drop.
Alright, so you guys know this song, right? Donkey Kong Country 2. Sticker Brush Symphony. Alright, I'm gonna kill this. Alright. Okay, so these guys are gonna work on Donkey Kong Country 2 mixes. Andrew, what style are you gonna do your mix in?
I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. I'm gonna do something that's still really like ethereal and kind of chill, but I'm gonna give it some edge. Kind of like I don't know. I'm gonna try to make it like just feel like a little more sophisticated. I mean, it's already a pretty sophisticated composition, but I want to make the arrangement kind of unique, mixing a bunch of different styles. We'll see if it ends up being good or if it's gonna be compost.
And Mike, what are you gonna do?
So I actually remixed this song a while back for an album I did called Smash Brawling Beats, where I featured a vocalist from OCR called Akuma Joe Belmont.
Yeah.
Some of you might know that name. This is where you'd applaud if you know who that is.
Yay!
So I have this vocal mix. It's this kind of chilled, you know.
I fear I'm losing time, trying to get.
So we're doing a vocal mix on my side today.
Nice.
I'm taking this song, I'm taking the vocals from it. I'm gonna turn it into like a really, really high energy, but still with a lot of ambiance because it's Sticker Brush Symphony, drum and bass number.
Nice.
So
Very cool.
try and give it some really, really hard-hitting electronic edge for this time around.
Great. Okay, so these guys are going to get started. We're going to check in with them in maybe like 15 minutes or so.
That's good, yeah.
That's good, guys?
We'll have something to show.
Okay, cool.
Oh, and I had a sinus infection on the plane yesterday, so I'm down one ear right now.
Oh.
So if it sounds like garbage,
You're gonna mix everything in
that's
mono?
why.
Yeah, just mix in mono.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So the way this panel always works is we basically just take questions from the audience. So if you have any questions about music production, composition, just ask and we will try to answer. And then we'll go from there. So if you have questions, just like throw your hands up and get into it. Over here. Doing an original. Remix versus original. Nabil?
For me, it's actually not very different. What I think of when I'm making a remix is I'm composing a song with a melody that already exists. So it's pretty much the same process for me. Because when I'm composing, I come up with a melody and then I do the same thing as if I was remixing it. So they're really one and the same.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me, but sometimes when I'm doing a remix, when you're doing a remix or an arrangement, really what we're talking about is not really remixes, but arrangements. So when you're doing an arrangement, the difference is there's so much material that's already there that you can kind of work off of. And sometimes an arrangement is very, very straight. It's just a cover. You know, you're just taking the lines, the rhythms and the melodies and the notes and just playing it on a different instrument. But sometimes you kind of have to dig in, look at your chords, look at your harmony, look at how the counter melody is interacting with the melody and kind of dissect it and pull it apart. And then you can put things back together in an interesting way. When you're writing an original, you can do anything you want. There's nothing guiding you. So you can kind of just come up with an interesting bass line and then go from there. And but there's similarities and there's differences, I guess. Does that answer the question? Kind of. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. More questions. What do we got? Right. So how do you deal with ear fatigue? He said. So when you're mixing for a long time and you got your headphones on, take your headphones off and go take a walk.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing that you want to do is, and I've talked about this online before, but sharing your music and sharing works in progress and getting feedback from other people and fresh ears is a really healthy part of the creative process. So you should always don't mix in a vacuum. Don't write and compose in a vacuum, because what's going to happen is you're only going to hear the good things, and you're not going to hear all the flaws. So then you throw it up on YouTube, or you put it up, you submit it to OC ReMix or something, and like it just gets torn to pieces, and you're just like, well, what the hell happened? I thought this sounded really good, and you don't realize that the drums are in a different tempo than the rest of the song, which is a thing that actually happened with someone. They posted their song on OC ReMix forums, and people were like, this sounds terrible, and he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, the drums are a different tempo, dude. What are you doing? So you want to always step away from your work for a while. That's another thing. Like step away for a couple hours and then maybe go back, or like give it a couple days or where you don't listen to it, and then go back and then you might hear some stuff. Yeah. No, that was not DJ Frog. It was someone else whose name I don't want to mention. Nabil, yeah.
So the thing with ear fatigue for me, I'm usually working on music at nighttime, and when my ears start hurting, that's usually a cue for me to just go to sleep and wake up in the morning and see how it sounds. Because when you sleep and listen to something in the morning, it sounds really different. Like everything is kind of refreshed in your memory.
Right.
Even if you take a walk or something, it's still not as dramatic as an effect as if you go to sleep. So I like to sleep on music.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, we actually are selling stuff in the back if you guys want to buy some stuff. I know that's not really why you're here, but we have like OC ReMix t-shirts and stuff. So if you want to go back there, you can buy some stuff. Jarrell's back there. Hey, Jarrell. Yay. Okay. All right. So let's continue with the conversation. Some more questions about creative process and music production and stuff. In the back.
That's a good question.
Yeah. How do you know when you're done with a track? Nabil?
Usually when I'm sick of working on it. I mean, really, like if you're like a perfectionist, and most people are perfectionists, you're gonna keep wanting to work on a track forever and ever and ever. But at a certain point, you have to just stop working on it, because it's healthy for you as a musician to work on different things and to keep trying new things. So if you work on the same thing forever and ever, you're not really gonna help yourself. So usually I try to make my remixes, if I have to do remixes, around 3 or 4 minutes long, and try to give them an ending, and then just call it a day and go work on something else so I can improve somewhere else. Yeah,
one thing that works for me is when I get to a point where I've done everything I've wanted to do with the arrangement, that's when I kind of know I'm done. So usually, if I'm writing a remix of like a track from, say, Mega Man or from Sonic or something, what I like to do is I'll start with a straight-up remix of, say, Marble Zone, and then I always want to have like a section in the middle that kind of changes stuff up a little bit, and maybe I'll use like a different track. So maybe I'll like throw Labyrinth Zone in, or Hydra City Zone, or something else. I'll put it in the middle, and then I'll kind of go back to like Marble Zone in the beginning, and then that kind of gives me like my structure. So it's sort of like some songwriting stuff where it's just like you have your ABA kind of structure, and there's nothing wrong with like following formulas when you're writing music. That's a thing that sometimes people like frown on that, where it's just like, oh, like you should be really original, and you should try to break new ground, and you should try to like write something that no one else has ever written before. Well, it's not really what you have to do. You can have a lot of fun, and you can find a lot of success and do very well by following formulas. ABA, verse, chorus, verse, bridge. I mean, that's just basic songwriting.
A lot of the best remixes on the site are like they're very formulaic.
Yeah, it's like then formulaic is often used as like a criticism. It's not really. It's just a description of like, oh, this is the structure of a song. A lot of classical music is all just like formula, you know, sonata form.
Most of Mozart's pieces are all the same
Yeah.
exact formula.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. So what I like to do, like I have, when I'm writing music, I have certain formulas that I follow, and I have, okay, as long as I hit my main section, and then I do my middle section where everything kind of changes, and then I come back to my main section, I'm good. That's where my song can kind of end. And then I'll write an ending, or I'll do a fade out or something. But you can kind of follow structures and formulas, and then that's a good indication of, to know when you're done with something.
Also, I just want to add, you can go online and look up like interesting song forms if you want to like change it up. Like still use pre-existing forms, but there's a lot of them out there. It's not just the typical ABA ones, right? So
Yeah.
you know, go online and look for. You can look up chord progressions that already exist or song forms that already exist and use that as a template.
Does that answer the question? Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. If you keep like trying to fix stuff and change stuff. One thing is, like I said before, share it with someone. And if they listen to it and they're like, "Dude, this is awesome," you're done.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really have to work on it if these people are like, "This sounds great." So,
Like I said before, it's good to move on to the next project if you want to really keep improving your skills.
yeah, sometimes good enough is good enough. Right here. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In the yellow first, and then okay. Sure. Right. Hang on a sec. Hey, Mike. Can you answer a question?
Yes, what's the question?
So can pose the question again?
Uh-huh. Okay. So the question is, how do you deal with kick and snare design, especially in electronic music sound design? So where to learn how to do it? Lots and lots of doing it wrong, and then eventually doing it right. No, but so when you're mixing a kick drum, one of the things you have to keep in mind is in EDM, especially, your kick drum and your snare drum are kind of your two main things in the song. Like those are the things you're going to have your listener hear above like everything else. So they have to be punchy and hard-hitting and all the right frequencies in the right places and not in the wrong places. Which, no duh, but that means you want to take out, you want to carve them very, very specifically. For me, when I'm dealing with kick drums, I am keeping very, very close attention to where the kick drum is versus where my bass line is, where the frequencies are overlapping. Usually side chain the bass line against the kick drum so that way it stands out better. And usually I want to make sure that kick drum is nice, is kind of one of the lowest things you hear in the song. What I've done in the past, which doesn't translate very well to a large system, as I've found out, is let the kick drum kind of live around the 80 hertz area and let the bass line carry all the sub frequencies. It turns out that doesn't work as well as I thought it did. Actually a lot of my earlier work, you can kind of hear that. And so if you want to hear how not to do it, that's a good resource there. But really, it's a lot of EQ and a lot of compression and a lot more of that than you think. I go to town when it comes to compression and EQ on my kick drums, like almost to the point of distortion, just so it hits that much harder. There's a bunch of different options out there, but a transient shaper has been my best friend lately. FL comes with one baked into it, I think for free, but I'm not sure. Either that or it's very inexpensive. Native Instruments has one that's part of their complete pack, and some other ones out there as well that make it just this really easy one knob. You just dial it and it's punchier. Not necessarily always the best way of doing it, but certainly a nice, easy shortcut. So I'm not sure if that answers the question very thoroughly for you.
So I want to add for resources, there's tons of great tutorials on YouTube also, besides asking Flexstyle in a panel. And so if you look at Zircon, have you heard of Zircon? He's a EDM remixer. He has a lot of great tutorials on YouTube for like synth design, and also he does like a lot of like fat beat tutorials. And then there's also tons of other like drum design tutorials, like especially for EDM. So go on YouTube and you'll find tons of stuff. Yeah. Right. If you come to OCR, we also have like a Discord channel, like a chat room where we're in a workshop, and we have decent people in there answering questions, and especially like our EDM remixers, and they can answer your questions also about kick and snare design and give you feedback. Yeah. So do come and integrate with the community.
Yeah. Okay, so behind you were next. Yeah, go ahead. If you have no musical background, get a musical, no, get one. No, what you want to do, so the question was, if you have no musical background, where do you start? Well, the first thing you should be doing is listening to a lot of music, right? That's the first thing. So listen to a lot, okay? And then if you want, it depends on what you want to get into. So if you want to get into like rock and you want to, get into that kind of thing, maybe take some guitar lessons, right? Or maybe take some piano lessons. Or if you want to get into more EDM, guitar lessons and piano lessons can't hurt because they're going to teach you like some music theory. But also maybe just download a free demo of a DAW, like FL Studio or Studio One or Reaper or Ableton, I think, has a demo. There's so many demos. There's so many DAWs out there. DAW is Digital Audio Workstation. And that's what most people use to record and sequence and make music on a computer. So you want to download a demo and then just start playing around. Start arranging songs that already exist. Maybe do some ear training. There's a couple of websites where you can learn you can learn some really rudimentary music theory. So you start learning what a scale is. What notes are. What does the word pitch mean? Yeah. You learn about rhythm. I think these things are really important. There's only so much you can do just by listening to if something sounds good. That's my opinion. Yeah. But learning a little bit of music theory can really help you. There's a lot of resources online. Talking to other artists and just getting like some one-on-one help, that kind of stuff also works. Like Nabil said, join the OC Remix Discord and start like doing that stuff. Like start talking to people. Arranging really helps before like writing your own music. I remember when I was in high school, I took a composition class. The first thing our teacher had us do was arrange existing pieces of music before writing our own pieces of music. Because when you're arranging, you learn the structure of how a song is constructed. You learn about all the different parts, bass line, your accompaniment, your melody, counter melody, how harmony works, all of these things. It's a lot to learn, but you can start off by just downloading like a DAW and kind of like fiddling around in it, or taking some music lessons. And you're never too old to take music lessons. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
I think ear training would be the most important thing, especially for remixing. Just so you can identify how a song that you like works, see like what it's made of, and transcribing it.
Right.
There's even if you have good ear training skills and you can tell what's in a song, just the task of writing out what's in the song, like just writing it down, it's called transcribing. That helps you a lot with writing your own music also.
Yeah, it also helps, and I've talked about this in previous panels, but listening critically to music is very important. So like I said in the beginning, listen to a lot of music, but don't just like throw on a song in the background and kind of like, do your laundry or whatever. Sit down, put on a song, and one thing I always like to tell people every year is when you're listening to a song, normally when you listen to a song and you sing along with it, you're singing along with the melody. This next time you listen to something, try to sing along with the bass line. Isolate what the bass line's doing, or isolate what the piano's doing, or the synth line is doing in the background. Not the melody, but try to sing along with that and see what's happening there. And try to start separating the different parts of a song in your mind by listening to it and isolate everything. And then from there, start transcribing, start writing it down. I mean, learn how to actually do it, but write it down and start breaking a song down And what that'll do, that teaches you how a song is constructed, and then that leads to being able to write one yourself. All right. In the green, and then I'm going to go over to this side. How to make pitch bends sound natural. Nabil?
Do you mean on like a synthesizer or like an acoustic instrument? On a synth. I guess this is a good question for Flexstyle because I don't do a lot of pitch bend stuff.
Pitch bends.
Pitch bends.
How to make pitch bends sound more natural. Well, I mean, what do you mean by natural? That's another question.
Okay.
Yeah.
More expressive.
So I can.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure. And okay, so that's a good question, and I can speak to it a little bit. What you'll want to do is you don't want to have a straight 1 point to 1 point automation. You want to like tween it, like ease in or ease out, and it depends. Sometimes you want to start the pitch bend before the actual note hits, and so there's that little like scoop up into it, and then oftentimes doing a really fast pitch bend at the end of a note will help add it. But if you're just trying to like get like say you're like a guitar player, you want to like simulate like a guitar bend, they're not going to go immediately bend from one note straight to the other. It's going to be faster in some points and slower on the others. So either trying to have it jump really quickly and then slowly get up the last bits of it, or the reverse, where you have it slowly go up and then jump up more at the end. I think that you'll have, and then mixing up all those different types makes it sound more natural. Yeah.
Cool.
That's actually an interesting question because I actually do it the same way every time. Like,
Yeah, I also do pitch bends. It's like one step to one step, and it takes exactly a 16th note to go from one to the
good.
other.
It's good to be detailed like that. And you know, when you write synth lines that are really expressive, it really brings the music forward. Though,
Yeah.
so that's good. It's a good question.
Yeah. We got a question way in the back. Yeah. Right.
Like sampling from a like. Yeah. Do you mean like sampling from an existing track or something? Right. Right. I mean, I can give some basic tips. I mean, so like you want to isolate what it is you're trying to get from the track. So if it's like a drum sample or something, you usually want to target the frequencies of the drum. So if it's a kick drum, you want to kind of just get the low end. If you keep all the high stuff in, you're gonna get all the rest of the song in there. So if it's a drum sample, you're gonna inevitably have to close that down a lot. If it's like a vocal sample or something, it's actually very hard to get that without the rest of the track in there. But a basic thing you can do is look at charts online of like frequencies where the human voice is and isolate around those. So really it's a lot of EQ. That's your main friend in trying to isolate those samples. But you can never get them out 100%.
Up here.
Right.
Sure.
This is something that I've actually had some trouble with myself because I've gotten all the basic stuff down.
Right.
I'm pretty comfortable with all that. But all of the not basic music theory
Yeah.
resources I've found have been really advanced.
It's very academic. Yeah.
Very academic.
Really sophisticated songs that I'm kind of just built.
Yeah.
Are there any like intermediate music theory resources that are available, especially from the perspective of a songwriter? Like, okay, what is a tritone substitution?
Yeah.
So the thing is, the reason I recommend like basic music theory is generally because and you're not going to like this answer, but basically the reason I say that is because once you have a rudimentary understanding of music theory, like what are notes, what are scales, what are intervals, that kind of stuff, at that point you can kind of do whatever the hell you want, if that makes sense. So the thing about music theory is that music theory is not prescriptive, it's descriptive, or at least in my opinion it is. What it's basically doing is it's just giving you the vocabulary to talk about what's happening in a piece of music, rather than giving you the rules of how a piece of music is supposed to be written, right? So when you have that vocabulary from your basic music theory, when you're writing, when you're like a songwriter, you don't really need the vocabulary to really describe what's happening unless you are having a dialogue about that with other people.
I will say, that being said, do you know how to read sheet music? Sort of, I guess. Right. So, I mean, so what you can do is you can look at they call them lead sheets. So there's for example, you mentioned a tritone substitution. So with jazz songs, they have things called lead sheets, which is just like a melody and like the chord symbols on top. And really what you want to do is to sort of see the patterns and how everything's working. You just want to analyze those chord progressions. And all I can do for like intermediate advanced stuff is recommend certain textbooks, but I'm not going to do that here. But if you come to the OCR Discord and ask more specific questions, like if you want to learn something specific, like a specific topic, we can point you to specific resources. But you're right, there's not like a basic music theory site, but for like intermediate music, they don't really make those.
Yeah, you're either just learning some quick ear training and some piano stuff and intervals and stuff, or you are going to school for music. And taking
you're at the point where you need to be talking, asking questions to people who can teach you rather than
So yeah, like a college professor is really going to be like the best resource for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to add to that, John? Yeah. Hey, John, can you come up here and just speak into the mic because they are recording it? So, well, no, because they're doing it. So. This is John Stacy. He's an OC remixer. Hey.
But I actually received a really good piece of advice in high school whenever I was kind of going through a similar thing. And what it was that it was a guy who was, he had a music degree in composition, but he kind of quit doing that and just did video game arrangements on the side and then worked in IT, and that was what he did. But his thing was that he gave this advice to many people who asked this question, was that get really, really, really good with the basic stuff. Like, you have the basic knowledge, and so what it is like, if you hear a chord, like you hear a chord progression, can you, let's say it's like a combination of like 1, 4, 5, minor 4, kind of things like that. Can you tell those relationships without thinking about it? Could you get to that? And then it's like, even you're hearing a melody and it's like da da. What interval is that? Can you hear that really good off the top of your head? So there's really basic stuff. If you get really, really good, like you know it like the back of your hand, then adding new stuff is that it's like a tritone sub you mentioned. It's like, all right, so you have a 5. What's a tritone away from that? That's a flat 2. And then if you're really good with all those relationships, it's just adding another quick thing. And then other relationships come really, really quickly, really, really easily. So that was the advice I received. And then I kind of took that to heart. And then I'm not actually that good with theory, but
going along.
I've added to it, and then I went to music school, so I got that stuff. But before that, it was a struggle, and it was a lot of beating my head against the wall, and it was just gradual change that didn't seem to pay off, and then eventually got better. But
going along,
Thanks, John.
Yeah, going along with that, what I like to think of it as is after I learned all the basic, fundamentals, I had a strong foundation in that. I like to think of music theory as like a box of tricks, and I'll see some cool harmony or cool sound in some track, right? And I don't know what it is, and I'll play on my keyboard. I'll try to figure out, what is this chord progression, and I'll be like, oh, it's this to that and that, and then like I'll just keep that sort of in storage, and now I just have like another thing in my giant box of tricks I can use when I write music, right? Some weird chord progression or something.
Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question. Cool. All right. Sam.
So I have my super cool, totally unique remix album concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna be the best thing ever.
Yes.
How do I pick the songs now?
How do you pick the songs?
How do OC remixers pick the songs that make these amazing remix albums?
They just asked Jenner. No. How do you pick something to arrange? That's a good question. Usually it's just like, oh, I hear something in a song that kind of like grabs me.
Yeah.
You just hear something that's like maybe a cool rhythm, or like you like the way the melody goes, and then you're like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I can do something cool with that. And you start doing like, a funk version of Secret of Mana, or maybe there's like a little little bit that like when you repeat it over and over again, that sounds really cool. So you start repeating that, and then you start writing stuff over it.
Yeah.
Another thing is I have this app on my iPad. It's called Fugue Machine, and I've been like proselytizing about this forever because it's the most amazing thing. But what I did is I took Fugue Machine and I put the Song of Time into it from this game, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. You guys know this game? No? It's really cool. It's on N64. You should check it out. So I put the Song of Time in there, and then like this app kind of just like plays it and then plays it at a different speed, and then it plays it backwards and forwards, and it kind of like transforms it, and then I kind of use that as like a bed to sort of like improv over that and like, you know, do like drums and add stuff. So there's a lot of different things. Sometimes it's just like it's easy, you're just like diddling around on like a keyboard or something, or sometimes you really sit down and was like, I'm gonna arrange Legend of Zelda, and then you just do it. I mean, that's really how it goes sometimes. Nabil, how do you pick a song to remix?
Well, for me, it's like I'll hear a melody from something, and I'll be like, that would actually work really well as a bossa nova track or something.
Yes.
Like, or like, I'll, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for like for an album.
I think yeah.
Yeah.
For directors, I think each director's process is kind of different. I know that when Shark directs an album, he tries to focus on a theme for the album, and he'll pick tracks that can be arranged to fit the theme of the overall project.
Yeah.
Whereas other project directors will just do the entire soundtrack.
Yeah.
So I think it's a question for each director specifically.
Yeah.
You know.
I like to have like a more unique kind of like approach to different albums when I direct albums for OC ReMix, and I have directed a lot of albums for OC ReMix, probably like 8 at this point. But usually I do like, oh, we want to do like character themes, or like these are all like high energy themes from fighting games or something like that.
Or Cartography Bros was great.
Yeah, so one of them is actually, let's...
we haven't checked in.
We haven't checked in, but one of the things we did was Super Cartography Brothers. Do you guys know this album? OC Remix, we put it out a couple years ago. Mike actually directed it, Super Cartography Brothers. Oh, yes. Yeah, so the idea for that was map themes from Mario games, because they're really short and sweet, right? And then do a whole EDM album of just like map themes from Mario games.
It was really good.
And it's a really, really good album because Mike actually gathered a lot of like top like EDM artists, and he put it all together, and it's amazing.
You guys should check it out, by the way.
Yeah, you should check it out. Go to cartography.ocremix.org. It's really good. But let's actually check in with our remixers. Andrew, you want to go first, or? Sure. Yeah. So Andrew, you said you were doing a more like a chill kind of like.
It's a little chill, some edge.
To more of like a straight take on Sticker Brush.
Yeah.
Okay. So. Cool. All right. So real quick, what application are you using, and do we actually have like the projector?
I'm plugged in the HDMI. I'm not sure if the HDMI is working, but I'm plugged in.
Okay.
I used my digital audio workstation of choice is Logic. I think it's pretty good. I've used it for a long time. Has a lot of features, but it's easy to use. So I'll just start this up and we'll see how it goes. I'll max that. Oh, this is better go. So here. Well, I'll put it through like that maybe next time. We'll run it through here so we get a little more volume. So this is kind of where it shifted a little bit. I was kind of feeling a higher tempo, so it kind of turned into sort of trance.
Andrew, so what was the approach you took? I mean, obviously you didn't write all of this like just now. You had some like stuff like already set up.
So what I had set up here beforehand is I had kind of my my channels, and you can't really see it right now, but I've got probably like 20 some channels open, and I just had like the balance was already there. So it's like, okay, if I want to use this specific synth, and I do in some parts and others not, it's gonna at least sound relatively good with everything else. So I kind of pre-balanced it. I took the initial MIDI, chopped it up a bunch.
Okay, so you started with a MIDI.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so that's one thing that's one thing that you see sometimes. Sometimes what you can do is you just take like a MIDI file from like VG Music or something, and then just throw it in your DAW and then start messing around with it. That's actually another good way of like.
That's a really good way.
That's a really good way of like if you've never done this before, start like doing that. Start exploring, looking at the actual MIDI data visually, and looking at all the notes and everything, and you get like a good sense of it. I like to do everything by ear, but everyone has their own process.
Yep.
Right.
And by ear is really good. It just takes a long time. And one thing that's really nice about MIDI is, especially when you're first starting out, is you can solo at different channels, and you can hear what the original composer is doing, and then you can, what the whole sounds like, but if you take out certain parts, you can better focus on different things and see how they create certain moods and feels with just different arrangement techniques. You can start using those for yourself.
So, your specific approach with this, so you had like all of the MIDI data already in you threw it in there.
Yep.
And then you kind of adjusted the tempo a little bit.
Yeah, I bumped up the tempo. I moved some of the instruments around based on kind of what I was wanting to hear. Because I knew initially I wanted to have kind of like a halftime beat with like the twinkly piano and then like some sort of like harder edge bass sound. So I kind of had those sounds ready to go. And then as I went on, there was like some other synths that I thought would be kind of cool. Added those in. Now did a little bit of chopping on some killer. Chopped up some samples of like reverse cymbals and stuff. So just like for example here, like right here, there's some reverse cymbal stuff that I just chopped up really quick. So. So stuff like that, and then when it's all as like part of like the big drop, like right before, like it adds a nice texture to there and adds a little bit more excitement rather than a straight just reverse cymbal, and it makes that initial part more impactful.
Which, like, if you take anything away from this panel, is that like reverse cymbal is like the easiest transition to ever use ever.
Yep.
like don't do it after like the second song you write, but like in those first two songs that you write, reverse cymbal is like the way to go. Real quick, Green over here. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. No, I haven't. Oh, yeah. I will answer that question after we talk to Mike. But
What's
I will,
Rexy
that's
doing
a good
here?
question. I will answer it.
okay.
Also,
Hi,
hi, Rexy. That's Rexy. She's also an OC remixer. She came all the way from the UK. Yay! Okay, Mike. So, yeah. Workflow for chopping.
Sure. Yep, and it's not efficient, but it's the best. So time-wise, it is not efficient, but control-wise, it's going to end up exactly how you do it. There's no automation. I never automate my chops just because there's a lot more. You can get it to like 90% probably, but if you can't get that last 10%, it's super frustrating. And the extra time, like manually taking the wave file and chopping it into little bits and stuff, gives you that control that I like to have at least.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mike, you want to play what you've got for us?
Sure.
And then, so you had that vocal track, that kind of like down-tempo, kind of chill vocal track, and then you're bumping it up to like a D&B style?
Right.
Okay.
So I'm actually right now building the intro into the vocal track. So I'm not even at the vocal yet, really. But here's what I've got so far. So, really not much right now.
Yeah.
But
Okay. But that sounds pretty good, right? Yeah.
Most of my time just
good.
now has been spent building patches
Yeah.
and picking out drum sounds and kind of figuring out what my structure is going to be going into this vocal. Once I get there, the next, whatever we have, half hour, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
whatever it's going to be until we check in again.
We got 45 minutes left in the panel.
So,
Like 15 minutes would be good.
Yeah.
Maybe 15.
my goal is to get it to where at least I have through the first part of the vocal.
Right, and I can see from over here you're using FL Studio.
Yeah, so I'm using FL Studio, and it's what I've used for freaking ever at this point.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And although I'm using a whole bunch of extra stuff in here, if you want to pass that HDMI cable, we can try and see if I'll show up here.
Yeah, Andrew, you got the HDMI cable. You want to pass it to him?
Oh,
Maybe
sure.
we can get that on Mike's thing.
Maybe.
I don't know if it's gonna work. So Mike's using FL Studio. So Mike, you had like that classic kind of like D&B beat with the
Right.
that
And
kick
let's
snare,
see.
kick snare.
Hey, there's something going on.
No,
Display settings.
is it
Be
gonna show?
duplicating. I am outputting, and that's what my computer thinks I'm doing. So
All right, maybe the projector's just not going. All right, it's okay.
it's
It's all right. It's not a big deal.
whatever. So I just pulled up a string patch here as well. I'm gonna try and incorporate here.
Okay.
But I kind of before the panel started, I pulled open my favorite synths, Harmless and Serum and Omnisphere. I pulled up a Battery 4 patch to pull if I need to.
Right.
The drum loop is just a loop that I've run through some filtering. So I'll just take the effect off of that. Made it a lot thinner, a lot more suitable for an intro type sound.
So that's another thing. Like seriously, don't be afraid to use like pre-existing loops. Like snobs, like music snobs will like frown on that, but come on, just use whatever the hell sounds good.
Yeah. I'm using
don't worry about
pre-made
loops.
sounds in Omnisphere. I'm using really, really basic stuff in Harmless. I'm not putting a lot of effort into sound design here because I don't have time for that.
Right.
So,
Okay. So Mike,
whatever
you want
sounds good, use it.
Do you want to get back to work and then we'll keep talking to people?
Works
cool.
for me.
All right. So Rexy, you had a question about arranging songs you know versus arranging songs you don't know. Yeah. So that's an interesting question because usually a remixer, when they're getting into like writing remixes of video game music and stuff, it's all like songs from their childhood. Like most of my songs that I started remixing with were all like Sonic stuff. Sonic, I played tons of Sonic when I was a kid, so it was all like Sonic remixes, like Ice Cap Zone and Azure Lake Zone. But then as I started getting into just video game music, I just started like listening to a whole bunch of stuff, like songs from like Super Nintendo RPGs that I never played. Like I know all of these songs from like Live Alive and Treasure Hunter G. I've never played those games before, but they're amazing. The soundtracks are really good. And I mean, we're all here at MAGFest, so we know this to be true. Video game music really just like sometimes just transcends the game itself, right? I mean, we can all agree with that. So sometimes you just like listen to something, you're like, that sounds really good. I've never played that game before. I have no emotional connection to the game, but I think I can really get into arranging this because I like the bass line, and I think that the harmony is really cool at this one part. So let's try this. Nabil, you remix stuff from games you haven't played before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I also want to sort of also steer in the direction of remixing songs you've never heard before. If you like want to remix for an album or a competition or something, especially in competitions, this comes up a lot. When I have to sort of arrange something that I'm not familiar with, I will listen to it a lot first before I do anything. I'll listen to it over and over again. I'll look for the things that are important about it. So not just the main melody, but if it has a catchy bass line, I probably want to use the bass line in some form. I'll look for the melodies, I'll look for different sections, and I'll sort of just start building a plan of, okay, I want to use this part, I want to use this part, I just want to use this part, right? And then I'll sort of build a list of things I'm going to use in my arrangement.
Right. So I mean, there's nostalgia and the connection to the video game helps a lot because it gives you like this emotional connection and you really feel like, oh, I want to get into this. But sometimes it's just a very kind of mechanical, like I'm just going to look at this piece of music, dissect it, put it all back together in an interesting way. That answer the question? Kind of. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Over here
output
in the back.
right now.
Yeah.
Sorry. It thinks it's
Yeah.
putting out 1080p right now. It is.
Right.
Awesome.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Right. The first thing you do when you open the DAW for the first time, Nabil.
Make something.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it sounds sarcastic, but like you can't learn a DAW if you don't try to use it. So you need to try making something. You need to figure out all like the little pain points in your process. Like if you're trying to do something and you can't figure out how to do it in the DAW, those are the times where you learn, you know, what's good and what's not good about your DAW. And if you maybe need to switch, or you know, maybe you need to look up. Maybe you need to look at something in the manual, or you look online for like a different workflow, how people accomplish this. So really just try to make something and see, you know, what it's not letting you do and what it's really good at letting you do.
Does that answer the question? Cool. Cool. All right. More questions. In the hat over here. Right.
What was the question? Repeat.
So the question is some kind of tips and guidelines for like writing like a counter melody or like another kind of accompanying line that's doing something
Right.
that the melody isn't doing.
Right.
What I would say is that if you don't want to get in the way, fill in the spaces, okay? Because a melody's not just like a whole bunch of notes just in succession, like at the, you know, da 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 da. It's never gonna be that, right? Maybe it is. I mean, sometimes it
Sometimes
is,
it is.
but mostly it's not. There's always going to be some long spaces and some parts where the melody kind of slows and stops and then goes again. When you have your counter melody, fill in the spaces. And then also, when you're not necessarily filling in the spaces, harmonize with the main melody. Kind of sync up and then depart. Those are
Yeah.
some things that I like to do.
There's some other sort of more harder guidelines. So there's in music we have this thing called register, but we also in just normal speak we call it like the octave that your line is in, like it's high up on the piano or it's lower. When you have a main melody, it's occupying a certain space, right, in an octave, right? You don't want another counter melody to be like going back and forth, like up and down beyond, like we call that voice crossing. And what happens when you do that is the ear gets really confused. What is happening? What is the main melody? What each guy is doing? And so you want to kind of keep the two separate parts in their own spaces so that they don't cross each other. Also, like Sharik said, harmonizing is a really good way to kind of keep things kind of supporting each other but not clashing. But really, clashing comes from things being in the same space and fighting each other in that space.
Right. So building off of that, one thing that we see like a lot of amateur artists when they're first starting out on OC ReMix, they write a piece of music and it becomes very crowded. And then they start asking questions. It's like, well, how do I EQ this to make this sound better? I'm just gonna make up a statistic here, but I'm gonna say like almost 90% of the time, it's not actually an EQ issue, it's a part writing issue. And what that means is like you have too many things competing for the same space because they're all like bass lines, you know, or they're all like everything is happening in within the span of like 8 notes. So what you want to do is separate things, move things around, and you can solve a lot of crowding issues in your arrangements by just separating and maybe making certain things quieter. And you don't really have to get into too much of the EQ, because EQ is really like when you have to EQ that much, that really indicates this as a part writing issue.
Yeah, and you don't usually think of it, but there's actually a really dramatic surprise when you fix the writing and the mix just fixes itself just because you fixed the writing. And you can delete all the EQs, you can delete everything that you did, and it just sounds good by itself.
Yeah. I actually I don't really use a lot of EQ personally. I'm always focused on part writing and making sure that my bass line isn't clashing with my accompaniment, and my accompaniment is not really clashing with my melody. And my melody, if it has a counter melody, they're separated enough so that they're not like pushing against each other. Even with percussion, you don't want your percussion. If you have a lot of different percussion tracks going, you want to balance those too, and that can be really a part writing issue by filling in spaces rather than overlapping a lot of things.
Does that answer the question?
Cool. All right, more questions. Let's see. In the OC Remix shirt over here. Okay, so the question was, what's the process for choosing instrumentation, picking specific instruments to evoke specific moods and feelings and that kind of stuff? Nabil,
Yeah.
you did like in Soul, you have a lot of like really like ethereal,
Yeah.
like crazy stuff. What was
Yeah.
your process for that?
Well, first I want to say my answer to this a few years ago would have been very different. My answer to this now is actually you should listen to a lot of music, like a lot of different kinds of music, so that you can see how different people use different instrument combinations. And then like that, as you listen to the music, that just gives you ideas on how you can use them in your own music, rather than just having a giant list of like 200, 300 sounds and just picking, random stuff. You need some sort of
Context.
some context, some background in your listening experience for sounds that you like in other people's music, so that you can choose instruments like that.
Yeah.
For example, let me give it a concrete example. I like prog metal, right? So that has a lot of like deep down-tuned guitars and stuff. But I also like sort of like Japanese anime music and stuff. So prog metal uses a lot of guitars and really thick drums, and a lot of anime music uses like soaring string lines and whatever. So I'll just sort of combine two aesthetics that I like, and just write a song that uses both of those things, like a string section and like a prog metal ensemble, right? And that's just like a specific example.
So a lot of, and it really is just important to listen to a lot of music. If you're gonna write music, you have to listen to a lot of music. You have to get a lot of input in order to create output. And when you listen to a lot of music, it helps to kind of build up your musical vocabulary. Not necessarily like when we were talking about theory, so you can like describe things, but really like, like when I have like high strings, that helps to evoke a lot of tension. Or when I have like, like thundering bass and like really fast rhythm guitar, that evokes a lot of energy. So without hearing that stuff ever, you're never going to really be able to evoke that stuff. So listening a lot really helps. One thing I remember when I was in band in high school, there was this one song that we were playing, and I remember there was a part where it was just a bass clarinet and a piccolo playing the exact same line, and they were really like just playing it by themselves, and it was very exposed, and it sounded straight up like something out of like a movie about pirates, or like about like sailors or something, because it had this very like kind of like a shanty kind of feel. Like it sounded like we were in like the brig of a ship, because it had this sort of like, the melody was sort of like nautical. It was very interesting how that combination of a very low like bass clarinet sound and a very high piccolo sound combined to create that, to evoke that in my mind. And the only reason I thought of that was because I had watched like some movies when I was younger where they used that kind of sound in a movie about pirates or something. So it's all like stuff from like when you're growing up and you watch movies and you play video games and like you listen to different songs and they evoke different feelings. That's how the instrumentation gets matched with a feeling. Like we think of fanfares as very regal and very triumphant and all that big brassy stuff, because that's how it's always used in whatever we watch and what we listen to and consume. So listening to a lot of music and sort of building that musical vocabulary helps you sort of say, okay, this is the kind of instrumentation I'm going to use to evoke these specific kinds of feelings. Does that make sense?
I also
Cool.
want to add like an exercise. If you're trying to write like a remix or something or an original track, and you're like, I don't really know what instruments I want to use, what you can do is you can actually find a song you like or something and just copy their instrument setup and try to write your arrangement or your original song like using that setup of instruments. That's actually a very good exercise for practicing your skills.
All right. Back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, like more complicated
Right.
synthesizers and that kind of
Right.
thing. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Getting into like
So-
synth design and production and stuff.
Yeah.
Nabil, you can.
So this is like the kind of stuff that's sort of, I guess, more modern. When it comes to that stuff, that's when you get to having to share what you're trying to do. You have to ask people questions. Like you have to talk to people in these online communities like Overclock Remix. You have to maybe link a song that you like by some EDM artist and say like, there's this kick sound I really like. Like, how are they doing this? Or I like this synth sound. I'm trying to make it in my synth and it's not working. You know, what do I have to do? And so asking questions and sharing what you're trying to do and like sharing your progress, getting that direct advice to like directly to you, that's the best way for you to learn this stuff. And sort of
Yeah, it's really hard to learn this stuff in a vacuum, and it's hard to learn synth design by just reading about it. You can only go so far self-teaching. It's really important to talk to other artists, and I mean, get online, look at like YouTube tutorials. If there's an artist you really like, maybe they actually stream on Twitch. I know a lot of artists, like Nutritious, who's a remixer and judge on OCR. He'll stream the production of a track sometimes. So you know, check out. I know, and Andy actually.
Yeah, Andy streams.
Zircon, he will stream like music production. So if you just like start watching some streams on Twitch of people doing music production, you can kind of say like, oh, they're using like this like synth, like they're using like Citrus from FL Studio, and they're using this one preset as a starting point and kind of adjusting it, or they're starting with like Synth 1. Synth 1 is a really good basic VST that's very powerful, and you can get a lot of really good sounds out of it. You can kind of like learn how to do that.
I will say also with synthesizers specifically, if you want to extend your ear training, your oral skills, there's a software called Syntorial, like SYN-torial, like tutorial, and it's basically like a little game quiz. It's like it starts at level 1, right? Square wave or saw wave, right? It plays a sound and you have to pick the thing, and there's like one control, right? But then each next question is like they add a new control, and then they play the sound and you have to tweak the control to find it. So it starts very simple for like the first 20. Right, and then all of a sudden you have this big vocabulary of basic synth parameters to make sounds that they're playing for you.
Yeah.
And then I think they have like hundreds of lessons. So you can just keep going, and they're going through all these different kinds of EDM sounds, and you're like playing the game, and you're trying to like figure out how they're doing it. And then by the time you're done, you're actually really
You're like
good.
an EDM producer.
Yeah. So you should check that out, Syntorial. I plugged this at the last year's.
Yeah,
panel,
yeah.
too.
Syntorial's really cool. I played with it a little bit, and it's like a game. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Over here. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, I mean, if I really like heard something and I didn't know what it was, I'd just throw it on Twitter and be like, "Hey, what is this?"
I would say once you get to a certain point with the stuff that you can ask people and maybe find out using stuff like Centaurio and stuff, you have the foundation to figure things out at that point. Like there's a point where you can just figure things out. It's not like you can't understand what something is made of anymore. It kind of like you kind of just have the skills to find out what's going on in a certain sound. But if it's really not something that, I mean, there's always someone you can ask. There's always someone better than you who can figure out what's going on. So I would say asking people is the best thing to do.
Yeah, you want to come up here, Bill?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I do for a living is do sound design, and a good book to actually look for that helps you look at various waveforms that make up actual real instruments like oboe or things like that. There's a book that's been around for years, actually a series of books called the Synthesizer Cookbook, and they've been around since about the 70s, and it's a good foundation of looking at just using a couple oscillators on how creating classical instrument. You're not going to get it exactly, but it gives you a good foundation of where to start off and the timbres that make up various instruments that that you hear in classical music or whatever.
Right. Synthesizers Cookbook. That's a good find. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, Bill. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like white noise. Yeah, white noise drums and stuff.
If you get involved with the chiptune community, they can answer a lot of questions like that because they've been doing stuff, they work with the sound chips and they like to dissect like what happens in the sound effect. It's like this oscillator going crazy with this weird effect on it or something. Especially in the tracker community because they're writing the actual like instructions for each oscillator and they really know their shit on how to make these specific effects.
I don't know off the
not
top of my
sure.
head because I don't really do. Does anyone know of any like
The tracker
let's
community.
like put it out like Battle of the Bits? Oh yeah, like little compos. Yeah, that's cool.
You should.
Oh, cool.
I would also say I've seen tons of videos on YouTube of people like posting their tracker compositions and like they post the playthroughs of like what's going through the tracker as they're making this crazy jazzy chiptune composition. And you should watch these. If you follow along these videos, you can learn about how they're writing these effects and stuff in the chiptunes.
Cool. Chiptunes equals win. Yeah, yeah. Right. Chipmusic.org. Cool. Which one? POUET.net. Tracker community. Cool. All right, cool. So there's a lot of resources online that you can find to get into chiptunes and stuff. Cool. Because I don't do chiptunes. Got a question up here?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
It's kind of actually accurate to a degree. To an extent, you can work with free sounds or cheap sounds and get a good sound, but when you listen to mixes like Sam Dillard, especially, like he has just like balls to the walls invested so much into his workstation and his workflow that he can very easily create that sound. But so you can build up to that though. Like you don't have to start at that. Sharek knows all about working with free sounds.
I worked with free sounds for like almost like 14 years, just like sound fonts and stuff. One of my most popular remixes is Ancient Hero from Wind Waker, and that's all free sound fonts, and it's an orchestral thing, and people love it. It doesn't sound that good, but people really like it. But yeah, eventually I also eventually moved on from using exclusively free samples. I think one time, Big Giant Circles, who's pretty, Jimmy Hinson, he's a pretty big remixer on OC Remix, and he works in the industry. One time he said, dude, like you're writing everything with a yo-yo. It's time to invest in an Xbox.
Yeah. I will also say, for the inevitable, if you're interested in continuing orchestral and you want to get better sounds, there's actually a great piece of advice that Will Roger over here he says in Discord a lot, which is that don't like buy a cheap set or like even an intermediary set of orchestral instruments. Save up for the really good stuff, because you're just gonna burn a lot of money going through stuff that doesn't satisfy you, and you really want to get something that you're satisfied with, like in the end, for a long time.
Yeah, and even if you get like the really high-end stuff, when you start out with it, you're gonna be able to like work through it and learn the sample set. Because one piece of advice that I used to give a long time ago was that when you're writing, and this is more true for free samples than it is for like the more expensive stuff, but when you're writing something and you're like writing like a violin line and you're writing it with using like a free violin sound font, you're not actually writing a violin part. You're writing a violin sound font part. So you're writing for your samples when you're doing like sequencing and stuff. And the more sophisticated a sample library gets, the less you have to write for the samples, because there's a lot of stuff that basically helps to emulate the live performances.
Yeah.
But really, like when you're starting out and when you're using like the less good stuff, you are not writing like a trumpet part. You're not writing a violin part. You're not writing a bass like guitar part. You're writing for those samples.
I mean, I know that when I got sort of like maybe $100 or $200 sets of orchestral instruments, they weren't good at particular kinds of writing, and I never wrote music that was in that kind of writing. Like for example, like a lot of like fast lines or a lot of like staccatos and bombastic stuff. Like those sets weren't good at that, and so I never wrote that kind of music, and that was kind of something I missed out on. And when I got these, more expensive sets or whatever, then I could go back and do those things. But like I missed out on a huge part of like music just by having to write for these crappy sounds that I have.
So the thing is, what it boils down to is that you can get started without spending any money at all, right? But sometimes there are certain things that you're going to want to do where money is required. And that's a hard sell for a lot of people, because like for a lot of people it's just an amateur thing. I'm up here, I'm telling you all this stuff. I do web development for a living. I'm not a professional composer. I've just been doing it for a long time. And I've spent some money on music on samples and plugins and stuff, but I don't spend a lot of money on it. And that's good enough for me. But if you're really going to get into this, especially as a professional, it pays to invest.
It does pay to invest a lot
in your craft. It really does, because there is and I'm a big proponent of free samples, but there is stuff that you just cannot do with the free stuff, and don't pirate, like straight up, like don't pirate
Please
stuff,
don't.
like, because those sample companies don't actually make a lot of money off of those libraries. They really don't.
Also, you have to be careful, because more sample companies are starting to watermark their samples, and they can pick out the license name of the person who bought the samples and shared them just by listening to the music. So just don't try it.
Yeah. So let's actually check in. We were supposed to check in like 15 minutes ago, but we're going to check in again because it's already 3:45.
Sure.
I just heard the Power Rangers communicator theme. All right.
All right.
All right. So Andrew, we're going to check in with you
Yeah,
first.
we're gonna try running me through the thing so I get the volume that I need.
Okay.
Yo, Mike's out when you're ready.
Mike? We're gonna check in.
We're checking
Oh,
in.
he was in the music. You see that? He was like super into it.
Sorry.
We're gonna check in. Do we want to run you through there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Volume.
So we're gonna try and run Andrew through Mike's like little
Crap, I
setup
can't
over
keep
here.
working while he's doing this stuff.
Yep. Sorry, man. I had to stop too. I'm right in the middle of something pretty sweet. All right. So just plug this in and hope. Like, how much volume do you want from me?
Give me everything you got, Captain.
Oh
Alright.
no.
You guys ready?
Cover your ears.
No. All right.
Into the mic. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. That's the part that I'm working on. So I'm trying to make a cool, like, more busy bass line here with the halftime. I can kind of like. All right, cool.
Also, can we,
the
can we
second half
clap,
will be
like-
even
Yeah,
better.
yeah. Also, yeah. Like that was really good.
So in the last part of what's been happening, like I'm not sure I really like the trance feel. Like it's cool, but like I think maybe I might change it later on. I think right now I don't have time to do it how I want it to, but I think the halftime is working a little bit better. It just feels cool, and I think more of the halftime with a busier bass line. So right now it's just kind of like solo.
So Andrew, you're actually like noticing stuff during the writing process that you actually want to change because you're getting ideas. You have something that actually sounds pretty good, but you're like,
Yeah, I just think like it's almost like and because it's like this is a sort of different situation where I can be kind of more creative. I can try different things, not feel like I have to. I can be experimental here. And the trance part is cool, but I don't think it's as compelling as the halftime. And maybe I can make them fit better with a little bit of tweaking. But
So this is actually part of the creative process. Sometimes you will have ideas and you will work a long time on them and you'll flesh them out and then you'll decide it's not working and you'll just throw it away.
It's painful, but you get
It's
used to
painful,
it.
but you have to be able to do that. I have done that. I've told this story like a million times. If you've been to this panel before, you've probably heard it before. There was a track I had to do for a Pokemon album. I started working on it, and then I got pretty far with it, and I didn't like it, and I threw it away. And then I started working on it again, and I got really far on it, and I didn't like it, and I threw it away. And then I picked an old, like, original track that I had, just like a sketch, and I started building a new track off of that, and I liked that. And then that's the track that ended up on the album. But I went through 3 iterations before I got to the one that I liked. And sometimes that happens.
Music is very iterative.
Yeah, it's very iterative. Sometimes you just throw things away. And you have to be able to just throw stuff out. And don't be afraid to just be like, don't get invested in how much time you spent on something. They call it the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, oh, I spent like 10 hours on this. I need to keep this baseline. Yeah, but the baseline sucks, dude. Just throw it away. Do something else. So I feel like that's what you're discovering here,
Yeah.
Andrew, that like, it sounds good, but maybe I'll throw it away. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
mean
archive-
archiving,
right,
yeah.
right.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and so in this specific instance where like the trance part is kind of cool, but it's not necessarily what I'm feeling, I would definitely like take that and I'd be like save as, and I'd cut everything out except for that and have like it's really good to have those like half-baked ideas, because like a year from now you might come back and say, okay, I want to take this in a new direction. I have this, I've kind of had like it's marinated in the back of my mind.
And then
for a
also
long
just
time.
like cut out the melody, and then you started off as like a sticker brush symphony, but now it's like Final Fantasy IV: The After Years.
Yeah, it could be whatever.
Let's also check in on Mike here.
Yeah, Mike.
We didn't,
Let's hear it.
Oh boy.
I'm ready. Come on
Is
in.
it bad? Is it good?
It's good.
We'll clap anyway.
You know it's gonna be good.
It's very, very, very unfinished.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
I'm discovering it's harder to do a vocal mix in 90 minutes than I thought.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm trying to like rewrite chord progressions and stuff like that at the same time. So that's always fun. However, what we've got going on here is we've got our little intersection right here.
I fear I'm losing time, trying to get back the feelings inside. I've been gone far too long. Come back to me and take me home. Take me home, take me home, take me home. Take me home, take me home, take me home. Don't leave me alone.
So what I did just there was I hit record while I was showing you guys that stuff. Which means that little bit I play on the keyboard right there is something I can now go into
do we have the video
and
feed?
modify.
We don't have a video feed.
Oh,
Can we get the video feed?
It's
I
gone.
ruined it. I'm sorry.
Detect things.
We lost it.
No.
Wait, maybe? Well, I have the remote. Let's see if it works. Where the heck is the projector?
I think it's behind.
It's back there.
Oh, we got something.
It's on.
Hey!
So while I'm not a very good keyboardist at all, what I can do is come in here and be like, okay, I like this middle section here.
So, Mike, can you play that isolated real quick?
Yeah. So, as you can tell, it's not really even the right melody necessarily, but it's a human playing it, and I can always edit the notes, move them around, quantize them, but they've got a little bit of that human feel to them now. So I've managed to put a little bit of humanity into my song. It's not completely robot, even though it's an EDM track, by playing it badly and then fixing it afterwards. It works.
The magic of MIDI.
That's about all I got at this point.
Yeah, so that's pretty good, Mike. Good job.
Yeah.
Good job. Yeah. Okay.
One other thing that this really illustrates is that if you can find yourself a good vocalist, they can carry a lot of weight. Because that is like
Right.
that vocal performance, like on its own, you can
Right.
just have that and like some synth, and
Yeah,
it would
just
sound
drench
awesome.
it in some reverb, and you're
And
good.
it's but even adding it to like a really high energy thing is a great juxtaposition of feelings that create something new and really compelling.
Yeah, and that's actually something that actually is good in. That's a good general advice for music is contrast. Use contrast in music. Really quick rhythmic stuff and then more sustained stuff over it, or vice versa. It really works. So we have a question over here. OC Remix shirt. How many tracks? How many tracks on average would you say you use on a song? Maybe 20, 30?
That's high end. It depends on the arrangement. So oftentimes with EDM, what you want to do is double a lot of stuff because, at least for me personally, I'll find a lot of synths, and I try to keep my workstation really lean. I don't like Flex has a lot of great equipment and infinity dongles. I've specifically tried to build my workstation so I have no dongles, so it's just very portable. So I'm running. I have my workflow is Massive, Serum, a bunch of the Impact Soundwork stuff, and basically any Stephen Slate drums, and then anything I can get that doesn't have a dongle. But that means sometimes I have to combine stuff. So for example, can I plug in quick?
Yeah.
I can kind of show some stuff from this mix specifically. No, I need the audio, sorry.
Oh, audio.
This doesn't work for me, and I think I broke it again. So my piano sound specifically is two different sounds. It's an acoustic piano and then a kind of a synth pluck that gives it more of the atmosphere. So
You want to isolate it?
yeah, I'm just gonna isolate it. Can I just move the volume? Oh, I turned it down for myself here. All right. So this is the piano sound. This is both of them, and then I'll solo each one. You can kind of hear the difference in how they combine. And I've done a little bit of MIDI delay, where it's a lower velocity note afterwards. So it has a really it has a good attack, but it also has that nice tail. And they're both kind of different things. So the piano on itself is not a really great sample, but when you mix it with stuff, it sounds better. So here's the piano by itself. It's okay, and it has some reverb, but and the tail part is, and it has a lot of those overtones that are missing in the piano. You can hear the higher stuff.
Yeah, sometimes doubling something but doing it in an octave helps too.
Yeah. Another example is what I'm doing with the bass. So I have a really nice deep house bass here. But I'm also mixing it with that more edgier kind of dubstep-y sound. So it has which sounds a lot thinner if you don't have the house bass underneath.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So a lot of times you'll have a lot of tracks because it's doubled. If I didn't double tracks, this one I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd have 8 probably, but because I'm doubling things and I have a lot of different tracks just for one shots that I want different volumes because I didn't have time to really automate the volume level, I've got 23. I'm not using them all at once, but certain ones. And then for me, once you add live instruments, it balloons ridiculously. If you're doing any orchestra stuff, it's like 30 minimum usually.
So the thing is, there's a question of tracks, and then there's a question of just parts and roles.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to think of different roles is to think of just a NES. NES was really good with this. So you had your percussion, which was just your white noise and stuff, and then PCM, and then you had your triangle wave, which was usually your bass line. Then you had 2 square waves. One square wave was always doing counter melodies or accompaniment, and your other square wave was always doing melody, right? So that's really 4 parts. You have your percussion, your percussion, your bass, your accompaniment, and your melody. So you have your 4 basic roles in most types of music, and then you can double and triple and quadruple any of those roles, and as long as they're not fighting with each other, you're basically having a sort of a full mix, I guess, if you want to call it that, or a full arrangement. So as long as you're capturing the roles, you're good. And a lot of times what you see with people who are new to that, they're not thinking about that. They have their melody and a bass line, but it sounds empty because there's no accompaniment in the middle. So that's one way of thinking about it. So there's tracks, and then there's actually your parts and your roles that you want to think about. Green.
When doubling tracks, do you lower the gain, or do you lower?
It definitely depends. So oftentimes you want to have them both a little quieter than what you would if they were by themselves because the frequencies will overlap, and if you have too much of that, it's going to be working your master compressor too hard. And it definitely depends. Like for the dubstep bass one, what I'm doing is I'm scooping out a lot of the really, really low frequencies that the house bass is filling in, because I just want to have that higher, like low mid edge to it. And I don't care about what it's doing in the bottom. And if I didn't scoop it out, it would have adverse effects on the overall mix. I'm doing it with EQ. You probably should do it with a filter. But yeah, basically.
So I also want to add to that also, something I do, especially when I'm writing my soundtrack, which has a lot of big, like, ethereal sound design stuff. Oh.
We actually ran out of time. It's like
ran out of time
4:01. Yeah,
already?
yeah. So we will actually talk about
talk
stuff.
more.
If you guys can just come out, we'll be outside. But we actually ran out of time. It's 4:01 right now. So. Wow, it got away from us. We were like, oh, it's 90 minutes. We'll be fine. Thanks for coming to the panel, guys. This was really fun. Thanks for asking all the really good questions. That was great. Let's get another hand for Mike and Andrew for mixing while we were talking about stuff. Thanks to Nabil for answering some questions and everything. There's a paper here. Make sure you guys check out, download Guidebook and check out Guidebook. It has like the all the MAGFest stuff on it. And there's a feedback section on Guidebook where you can fill out comments about this panel, I guess, and also about MAGFest. So thanks for coming out, guys. We'll be around if you want to talk to us. Our panel for the main OC Remix panel is tomorrow, right? At
Yes.
10 o'clock, 10 p.m.
10 p.m.
I believe it's in
and
here.
also tonight, before you all leave,
Yes.
tonight we've got the Overclocked Remix Artists Showcase down in Jam Space. So both Flexstyle and I will be doing a set. The first ever live performance by Zircon, and then Ben Briggs, Super Mercado Brothers, and Disco Cactus. So it's going to be really good.
Yeah.
So
It's like 4 hours, right?
yeah, it's going to be 4 hours.
Right?
It's going to be awesome. It's down in Jam Space. Starts at 6 p.m. So don't miss it.
All right. Thanks, guys.